And we're live. Hi, this is Shira Goldberg in a very windy situation in Sonoma, California. I have with me someone who's actually trending quite well. He's a very interesting guy. He'll tell us about who he is and what he does. His name is Dan Bigg, and the title of the article is just brilliant. I've never been equated with sainthood, that's for sure, but our guest has. He's the director of Chicago Recovery Alliance. Thanks so much for joining us today.
My pleasure, Shira. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, I'm really happy. I came across your article, or the article that was written about you, actually this week or this past week, and it talks about just a couple of parts in it I think just crack me up. But the title of it is the patron saint of harm reduction. So those are some big shoes to fill. So that interests me enough to actually read the article. So tell us, what do you do? You're from Chicago. We're talking about Naloxone. Just introduce yourself and get us going about what is Naloxone and what is your part. What part do you play?
Well, what Naloxone is a pure antidote to opioid intoxication, so that if you have any opioid-like drugs, synthetic, natural, legal, illegal, any drug that has opiate effects, Naloxone very quickly reverses those effects. As you likely know, one of those effects can be cessation of breathing and death. The #1 cause of accidental death in the United States among adults right now is overdose, and the vast majority of those are opioid related. So if people simply had this antidote and used it, and when I say antidote, I mean a pure antidote. This drug has absolutely no effects of its own. The only thing it does is reverse opioid effects. And right now, the only FDA approved route of administration is injection in the muscle, intravenously, other ways, but injection with a needle. There are some people that have been using it intranasally to some good effect. And this medicine could be saving tens of thousands of lives if it's in the right hands. And ultimately, if we get over our taboo, over our superstition, over our stigmatization of drug users, people can have this. All the famous names, as well as the countless anonymous names that have died of opioid overdose in the last year, didn't need to die. They could have easily been revived if someone near them had this simple, cheap medicine and revive them. We have now almost 5,700 reports of pure reversal with this medicine, and we've been doing it for 18 years and reached over 36,000 people. But families are saving loved ones. People using together are saving each other. People leaving incarceration are leaving more and more with the antidote to avoid the #1 risky situation, which is losing one's tolerance and then being thrown back again to a opioid use situation where someone might often reuse the same amount they used the last time, but because they've lost their tolerance, it's enough to kill them. So we know what we need to do, like much of addiction treatment, to make a difference, but we've prevented ourselves from doing it either out of moralizing, condemnation, stigmatization, expense, or bureaucracy. And what the great thing about Naloxone is, at least initially, we didn't have to deal with any of those things. This medicine was developed over 50 years ago. It's been off patent for decades. One of the questions, and maybe my only claim to sainthood, is that a layperson such as myself thought in grief of a friend of mine named John Zeiler dying, who helped found Chicago Recovery Alliance with me, died of an opioid overdose, and we had talked a lot about it, but his death was the motivation for me in 1996 with some friends who were prescribers to begin to get this out to people who were most in need of it, and then very quickly started hearing of reversals And it's just an absolutely amazing thing. You don't get addicted to naloxone because of the drug. You get addicted to naloxone because of its power at saving lives. And that's the wave, in a sense, it's riding now, both throughout the United States and throughout the world. And it's very heartening to see, but it didn't happen overnight. As you note, we've been doing this for 18 years. And the medicine's been out there for far longer as a generic for decades before we picked it up and started giving it to people who are most at risk for overdose. So nothing new about it. But basically, we started in the late 80s talking about doing something related to drug use and HIV. And we formed the Chicago Recovery Alliance. Probably the most important feature of that is our watchwords, our phrase, we described recovery as any positive change, as a person defines it for him or herself. And therefore, this huge area between chaotic, out-of-control dependence and utter abstinence opened up as fertile ground for change, stopping HIV, stopping hepatitis, stopping overdose. You know, there are all these things, these improvements in health opened up as possibilities, and that's basically what we've been doing for the last 25 years.
I saw on your website, I believe it was your website, there was a slideshow about what you're doing, and it showed a hypodermic needle used just even once, just how different it is from a from a new syringe. So you offer a lot of education as well, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we education about everything, and I'd say the most powerful piece of what we offer is a relationship that is non-condemning, that is focused on assisting any positive change, and is ongoing. Because if someone chooses from, let's say, a smorgasbord of options for positive change that we can make available to them, then they may not choose the right one, they may not choose the right intensity, they may not choose the right combination, but if you have a relationship with them that's based on acceptance and mutuality and collaboration and acceptance and respect, you can continue to walk that journey until you find those things that do work, that do make a difference, and help people make changes. As a matter of fact, nationally, of all the groups that have been reached to try to reduce HIV risk, people injecting have made by far the biggest strides at reducing HIV. And I think that's because so many of the options for safer injection are things that people really want to adopt. So all we're doing is focusing on those things, and the wonderful thing about it is that same mentality, that same direction offers so much hope for the future. For example, substitution therapy in the form of methadone is a very affordable medicine. That should be available to everyone who is opioid dependent. All physicians, all prescribers should be able to use that medicine. All pharmacists should be able to give it out. We shouldn't ghettoize this to a few places. In Illinois, 80% of the demand for that is unmet, and it drastically helps people improve their lives, reduce overdose, reduce all kinds of problems associated with drug use and opioid use and dependence, yet we don't do it. As a matter of fact, we do the opposite. What we do is we criminalize physicians that don't alienate their patients who are opioid dependent or abusing opioids. If a physician in the United States uses opioids, as many do, for their patients to relieve pain, and they notice that their patient is developing some abuse or dependence, they need to get rid of that person, otherwise they risk losing their license. They can't engage them in the most proven effective therapy, which would be substitution treatment with methadone or buprenorphine. They cannot engage them. Very few physicians can use buprenorphine now, but none can use methadone for addiction. And and its affordability and accessibility and proven track record of effect. So we are tying the hands of the physicians, and I should say threatening them with a pistol and or turning them into police officers. So we're doing around the worst we can maybe Russia is doing a little worse than us, but other than that, we're doing about the worst we can to alienate and harm our own citizens around drug use.
My questions are always, I think, reflect most of us who just don't understand why this is a life-saving, a proven effective means to get someone to continue breathing, but it's looked at as just so terrible. Do you think it's because the powers that be or the governing bodies don't really understand the magnitude of the effectiveness?
No, actually, you know, I think the opposite of what you do. I think in the past 18 years there have been times, the Bush era, where like, for instance, David Murray, who was head of research for the Office of National Drug Control Policy, I had the chance to ask him a question with his supported naloxone availability, and he said he didn't really know anything about it, didn't know why, but he thought they were opposed to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, at that time we had heard from a couple thousand people who had reversed overdoses, and I mentioned that to him and said, doesn't that sound like something you would support? He says he's not sure why, but he's against it. And, you know, I think that's a measure of just how insane we are in this country, that someone could be against access to and availability of a pure antidote, a drug that if you inject it into somebody who has, you know, is unconscious for any number of reasons, but other than opioid addiction or overdose, it won't do anything to them. It doesn't hurt them. It can't hurt them. As a matter of fact, if the paramedics came and you had given them 1 to 3 shots of naloxone and it hadn't done anything, telling that to the paramedics will help them, because they'll know it is not an opioid overdose and they can focus on other causes for unconsciousness. So either way, the layperson can do something which is life-saving. And to be honest with you, the comparison I've seen, and maybe why the Fix chose this saintly reference, is that it's very much like the religious reanimation that happens. You see people that are literally look dead, and by injecting naloxone into them, they wake up in a matter of a couple minutes, and they don't have a memory for what happened. You have to educate them as to what was going on. You know, they can see you crying, and they can see evidence of them being unconscious and near death, but they didn't see themselves near death. It's horrifying. But by reversing the overdose, and by the way, it's an aversive experience in every case. No one likes to overdose. No one likes to revive someone from overdose, because you don't want to have someone so close to death around you, period, stranger or not. I've revived a couple dozen folks myself, and it's not an experience you want to repeat, but it's one that it's nice to know you could. And in medicine, there aren't too many pure antidotes, but naloxone is one. What we say to the powers that be is release the antidote, release the cure. And we have 50, 60-year evidence of this as just that. Why keep it from people? It makes no sense whatsoever. So the opposition you talk about, I really don't hear too often. The one place that I do hear it is among people, some treatment programs, who think that they're a little, really they haven't really talked about it a lot, really is their only common characteristic in my opinion, but they're worried it might send the wrong message that you're going to use again. Now, despite the fact that they know that's often the case, I guess they'd rather have someone die than not. There's an article by John Strang following people who completed detoxification, and he found a 7% mortality in the subsequent year, mostly from overdose. Those that failed to complete detox, he found no death. So we're talking about an intervention, detoxification, and abstinence-based treatment, incarceration, which causes harm, which causes premature death, and yet It's a real hardcore person that's not willing to do something to try to end that lethality.
Yeah, my big question was, how can you not be a proponent of naloxone if it saves someone's life, because you can't get them off, or you can't help them get off of drugs if that's your intention, if they're dead. Like, it's game over at that point. So I don't see why there's such a disconnect between what I consider the obvious, if they're here, there's still a chance, versus they're dead and we haven't learned a lesson yet.
So there's some hope versus no hope. I agree with you. It's insane.
I just think that's so incredible. So I can't fathom all of these people that they're not interested in it for negative reasons. You know, I have to think that they just really don't understand, or they don't have enough education behind it, because that would really say something about our entire society. How can you advocate someone getting off of drugs and being 100% abstinent, but not advocate a means to keep them alive in order to do so? Like, what am I missing?
We do a lot of crazy things in our society. We do many things that cause harm. And in doing so, it's not too far a reach to think death is one of them. I mean, one of the things David Murray did say at the Office of National Drug Control Policy under George Bush was that he believes the problem was it changed the consequence matrix for those using drugs. And by lessening the risk of death, it might increase the attractiveness of drug use. So, in other words, people who are willing to use death as a potential deterrent to those using drugs. And they don't want to lose it. They don't want to lose death. It's too important a tool for them. You know, and all I say to people like that is, what would you want if someone you loved was using an opioid and in danger of overdose? Would you want the person next to them to have naloxone, know how to use it, or not? And there are two kinds of people. Almost everyone who answers that question says, of course, I would want them to have it. And then there's another type of person that says, I don't want to answer that question. And that's a person that scares me more than anyone else.
Me too, because I think you know, just saying I don't know and getting educated just seems more in the common sense realm than pleading the fifth. So you talked about naloxone and how it works, sort of, but how would someone who just found out about it get some naloxone? Is there training? Do you do that? You're in Chicago, so how would someone like nationwide find out more about the rights or their legal to prevent entanglements with the law? Because you know, people just don't know. Like there's this, if someone's overdosing, they don't want to get in trouble, so they'll dump someone off in front of the hospital. So you know, there's so much just lack of information. I think people would do the right thing more so than they do now if they were just aware of what their rights were.
I agree, and that there is a lot of confusion out there. In Illinois, for example, we have a law which basically empowers lay people to become physicians for all intents and purposes with regards to opioid overdose reversal. In other words, it allows us to learn about it, to be distributed naloxone, carry it, and use it in case of suspected overdose. We cannot charge for it, so don't get all excited. You can't make money off of it, but you can save lives. And as I said, we have over almost 5,700 reports of such lives being saved. And our legislators were very smart, and that became effective January 1st, 2010. The law exists basically to use, right now, sterile water and naloxone are the same level of regulatory control. So if you as a prescriber would have a problem giving someone sterile water that they can inject into somebody to save their life for one reason or another, that's the same regulatory issue they're dealing with naloxone. I don't think it's a difficult one to overcome if I was a prescriber, but I'm not. And but thankfully, I am empowered under Illinois law with our medical director, Wesley Cook, to um, train people and giving them this certain training, distributing naloxone to them by a standing order, and creating now over 36,000 people who are capable of intervening in case of opioid overdose. And not a week goes by when I don't hear of one or more reversals, and each is more amazing and heartwarming than the other, a life being saved. And whether it be at the hands of friends and family, most people who are doing it are people who are using. So drug users are by far, there's a poster in the UK, I think maybe in Scotland, and it has heroin addict, and it crossed out everything but hero, because that's what people are becoming when they use naloxone to save a life. And to think of heroin addicts as heroes is part of the transition that needs to take place in people's minds. They're the ones that are most able to use it quickly. The quicker you use it, the more likely someone's breathing will be restored and they will be unharmed by the overdose. There's some movement afoot for police officers to have this, and I think that's also a good idea. Not as cost effective as drug users themselves, but nevertheless, it's wonderful. There's a police operation in Massachusetts, Quincy, Massachusetts, that has revived over 350 people in their community. Narcotics squad. Prior to that, they were looked at as basically antagonistic to the community. Lieutenant Glynn there said the only food he was ever offered by the community was a rotten tomato in his windshield prior to doing this, and now he has mothers chasing his car down the street with bundt cakes to give it to him to eat. And you know, it's a paradigmatic shift in approach to drugs. I'd like to think we can do it a lot more. I'd like to think many other approaches to drugs, such as substitution therapy and so forth, that's so effective, can follow, and we can all work together to sustain life.
Well, I think what you're doing is incredible. I mean, you are in the trenches. I was telling you yesterday that I think the very first time I ever heard about naloxone, I was watching a show on National Geographic, and that was you, because you have this big van that drives around, and a life was saved with the camera guy right there.
Yeah, I mean, it's very common. We have a guy, Steve Kamenicki, one of our board members. He's revived over 100 people, and it's a very fulfilling thing to do. But again, it's no one wants to do it. It's aversive. Steve would be thrilled never having to do it again, because you know, you don't want to be living such on the edge. But you know, it's made a huge difference in how people view themselves, how people view their role in the community as drug users, and their relationship with drugs. I'd say, as an addictions counselor going back 30 years, that what it does is it is the biggest interruption of addiction that we have, or one of the most largest. Substitution therapy, also critically important, but naloxone availability, access, training, it trains a constructive element, a life-saving element. It ends the stigma and shame and increases the talk. Think about this. If you are a parent and your child uses opioids, for example, uses heroin, for example, for you as a mother, I'm thinking of this particular case, your child was coming home from a drug problem high school experience, and the first thing the mother did was sat that child down at the table and taught him about what she's learned about overdose prevention, and showed him her naloxone and made an arrangement with him. If you're going to stay in my house, and you're very welcome to, you need to, and you're going to use what you may do. Oh, God, I don't want you to, but if you do, you need to tell me, I promise not to kill you, I promise to watch your back, and I promise to help there, because I want you most of all to be alive when you get through with your using. And things went along for months, no problems. Kid was doing well at his job. And then his birthday was approaching, and he had something. The mother knew he was uncomfortable about something, and finally she asked him what, and he said, "Mom, I'm thinking about using on my birthday." She started to wind up, like, "You're doing so well," and blah, blah, blah.
Mhm.
She said, "Okay, I understand our talk. I remember our talk. I'll be there for you." And she sat down with him, and he was going to use, and he told her what he was doing in preparing the drug. She asked questions. He used the drug. She was ready to inject him in a moment. But she saw, basically, as in her own words, "You look like Uncle Sal when he goes up and he shoots back 3 shots of tequila at the bar. You didn't turn into a monster. You didn't turn into the devil. None of my fears. This is just a drug, like alcohol." But the mother was there. And so what happened is this shame, this isolation, this stigmatization had disappeared. And the drug lost its power. It lost its power to kill. It lost its power to separate mother and son. And most importantly, it lost its power for the kid. And let me tell you how. He said to me, "I have never been more able to use, more empowered to use, and I've never wanted to less." And I think that's because of his reclamation by his mother, his reforming of an identity with his mother, and recognition, and being looked at as part of the solution instead of part of the problem. And I think that's what recovery is all about, is reclaiming people we have lost to drugs. And reclamation through life preservation is what Naloxone is all about.
I couldn't agree more. There's this website for people that are interested to see where naloxone is available in their area that you told me about. I wanted to let everyone know it's called prescribetoprevent.org. So you look at, once you look it up, then you just type in your zip code, and it will tell you in relation to where you are, where the naloxone is. Now, the laws and the regulations, and I mean, it's very murky. I just found out what's going on in my own area, and I live in Northern California, but it would take me about an hour to get down to Berkeley, Oakland area to get naloxone. So this is something that is a preventative measure. You can't just run out to the pharmacy and grab some. So you have to have a plan, and that's what I really think helps with the discussion, like you were sharing with the mother and the son. Once everyone's on the same page and everyone knows what they're working with, then they can get a plan of action going. So I know people who have naloxone, and I guess it takes a while for it to expire, but if it expires, they get more.
Yeah, I mean, and making it available ongoing. If you store it at room temperature, away from the light, we have people reporting successful use of naloxone 10 years past its expiration.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't expire like that. Just like milk doesn't expire like that. But we offer it to people to replace it as soon as it does expire. But in fact, usually when you get it, it doesn't have more than 2 years of non-expired time on it. But if you store it away from light and at room temperature, it seems it can last significantly longer than the 2 years that might be on it.
So in your area, do you have to go through some training before you get a prescription, or do you just get the naloxone itself? How does that work?
Well, a physician anywhere, any prescriber anywhere, I should say, can write a prescription for naloxone you can bring to your pharmacist, and if they don't have it, they can order it for you. There's a new auto-injector, looks like this. This is called an Evzio auto-injector, and it has a trainer which actually teaches you a voice. Should I play it for you?
Yeah.
This trainer contains no needle or drug. To inject, place black end against outer thigh, then press firmly and hold in place for 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Injection complete.
So it's as simple as
This
that.
trainer may be reused.
And then it tells you to go, and it gives you 2 doses. Each of these is a dose, and then it has a trainer. The question is, how expensive is it, and can you get it? I'm told by Eric, who's the president, one of the physician who's I forget what his exact title is, but he's very much in charge of the company. He and his brother are twins who first developed an EpiPen and then developed this. This became FDA approved in April of 2014, and although my Walgreens pharmacist told me it's $760 out of pocket, Eric tells me that they've worked it out so there's an average of $28 patient cost for anyone with insurance. And then if you don't have insurance, there's apparently some patient assistance things you can get from Kaleo Pharmaceuticals. Again, Evzio, E-V-S, or E-V-Z-I-O is the name of the product, and it's very expensive. Comparison, ours is a few dollars, but you know, getting it out to people in every way possible is what it's all about. Kaleo Pharmaceuticals has said the same thing to us. As long as your healthcare prescriber is willing to write the order for it, you can have it, and you can use it to save lives.
Well, I think that was really, I got a little choked up when you actually did the naloxone, and I didn't realize it was that easy to do. So it's just a matter of getting informed and figuring out where it is in your area and just making a couple calls, and then you can save someone's life. That's truly incredible.
Absolutely.
It got me choked up a little bit. I mean, this is
I mean, it's incredible. It's like, you know, I was talking with a guy who describes himself as a Christian, and he said he feels the same about the naloxone reversal that he witnessed as he's felt the same about Christ's resurrection. And the comparisons are apt as far as I'm concerned. I mean, it's a person that for all intents and purposes looks and is dead, and you revive through this miracle of a medicine.
Well, I'm really happy to know that even if someone was in that, it would be a very traumatic situation with someone who's overdosing, they would know, at least try the naloxone, since it's a harmless antidote. It's not going to cause any more harm. So, I mean, that would be such a great first line of defense, because a lot of people don't realize. You know, I think just addiction. I mean, we're coming around, but it's so freaking slow. People don't really understand. You know, they think either you do drugs and you die, probably overdose, or you stop and then you have this wonderful, perfect life. Well, there's a lot of in between, and a lot of people who overdose, they're losing oxygen to their brain, and they can get strokes, they can become invalid, they can paraplegics. I mean, there's a whole range of what can go wrong. So just by being able to have that naloxone available, I mean, you could really not only save someone's life, but reduce permanent injury.
You know, it's worth saying. You captured it on the head. The issue is oxygen deprivation. Mm-hmm. So if you can do rescue breathing for somebody, forget about naloxone. If you can breathe for somebody, as long as you're breathing for them, they're not going to die. Opioids cannot kill. Heroin cannot kill if you're breathing for somebody. You know, I mean, you got to breathe well enough for them to sustain life, and it's quite challenging. That's why the naloxone is so helpful, because it's much better if they breathe on their own. But of the thousands of people we've had reversals reported on, only 2 have gone back to the overdose situation, which is very encouraging. And beyond that, so a second dose after reversal hadn't been necessary in 99.9% of cases. But it's also encouraging that the reversal it does something to somebody. We don't exactly have a handle on this, but it's a life-threatening situation, and it causes people to reassess things in their life. So, and I think that's both people using and people not using. But it really underlines the importance of living. How many of us would do anything to bring back those 40,000 people that died in the last year of an overdose? And here's just one thing we can do to stop it. We have a lot of mothers, a lot of parents, family members, co-drug users who are interested in saving lives. Integrating this into prisons, into abstinence-based treatment, into all addiction treatment is the simplest thing we could do, and is a movement in the right direction. I would like to see the future of addiction treatment the next 100 years based on something like this versus some superstition or white-knuckle position.
So you said in 100 years. What do you see in the next decade or two? I mean, you've been in this for 18 years? Have you seen an evolution, or you've been in it longer, really? But have you seen an evolution where you're feeling like things are starting to become more known or set in motion?
Yeah, I think this whole notion of evidence-based is encouraging to people. There's nothing more evidence-based than naloxone. I mean, it has a unquestioned, almost a century's worth of proven efficacy, and to not utilize it would be insane. The people that won't go that way, they're not going to be practicing addiction treatment anymore, because for instance, there's a mother whose child went through a program called Rosecrans, mentioned in that article, 4 times. She and her husband took out second, third mortgages and borrowed money to put their child through that. The 4th time he got out of that program, he was dead within 2 weeks of an overdose. A friend was there with him. If they had taught him about overdose and given him naloxone, which they easily could have, they've resisted our attempts to help them for many weeks, months now. But if they just did that, she'd have her son back. And instead, what she's doing is taking second and third jobs to try to pay back the loans. And she started to teach others so they don't have to go through what she went through. She's one of the pioneers. Her name is Bonnie. And she's one of the pioneers, but I'd like to think that the addiction treatment programs would educate themselves and put life first. And we would quit having people where going to addiction treatment and dying were synonymous.
You were talking to, I wanted to leave it on somewhat of an optimistic note, but I have to ask you, why don't treatment centers have this? What's your opinion on that?
Well, some do. You know, there's some of all different kinds that do. You know, there are plenty who do value this for the reasons that we've been talking about. Others don't, and I don't know what to say other than my belief is they're riding on superstition. They're riding on what's sometimes called a white-knuckled sobriety. And it should be an easy sobriety, a thoughtful sobriety, a life-affirming sobriety. To me, that should be the goal, and because that says much more about how people really live, how they really are, and how they can really rejoin society as constructive members in every sense of the word, regardless of their drug use. And that is what I'd like to see us move towards as in the addictions field, being there to help first and foremost with life, and from there with enjoying life and so forth.
So through articles written about you and in just conversations starting, I mean, there's a slow momentum, but I mean, this is information that I read about it every single day about naloxone in some capacity. So, you know, I feel like I'm immersed in this bubble, because when I talk to other people who have had experiences with heroin overdoses, or someone they love or themselves are addicted to heroin, they've never heard of naloxone. And each and every time it just blows my mind. I can't believe they don't know what naloxone is.
Well,
So,
Shira, you're part of that solution. So you should. I'm glad for your show. I hope you keep talking about it like I will. But more and more people just know over the last 18 years, someone who has every reason to be frustrated about this is not. I feel really hopeful. Every day, this notion of any positive change, it
mhm.
applies to this as well. And the positive change I'm having today is an interchange with you, Shira, and all the people that are seeing your show. So you're doing a great job, and keep talking about it, because the word will spread as it has for the last 20 years.
Yeah, I think it shouldn't be considered a four-letter word. It should be considered for what it is, life-saving. So, thank you so much for talking to us, and for just kind of enlightening us on what naloxone is, and it's not this scary thing that you can't obtain. It could save someone's life, and we need to have these conversations and get over the stigma and the ignorance, and save people. I mean, it's like you get to the point where you're so done with being ashamed or the stigma. It's like, just help me help myself, and this is one way you can do that. So thanks so much, Dan.
My pleasure.
All right, so definitely keep in touch with Dan, and you can see his current article on the Fix. It's under content. It's the Fix.com content. It's such a great article. Let me see where. It's patron state harm reduction, and that would be Dan Bigg, and countless others. He's the harm reduction agency that's close to us is the harm reduction in Berkeley. It's the Harm Reduction Coalition. So you can just Google harm reduction, and all of the important agencies and people will pop up and be happy to share their information and get you going in the right direction. So thanks again.